All right, folks, it is the Lex and Pete show. We are back. This is what, the week eight edition. We are officially at the
Okay.
halfway point of the season, of the regular season, I should say. We have the trade deadline approaching soon, NFL trade deadline coming up real soon. We got Pete back from vacation. We got some stuff to talk about. But before we get into any of that, as always, we will start with a word from our sponsors. Sundog Multimedia. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. What started as a personal tool has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to build and execute a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can follow them on Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. That's Instagram at Sundog_multimedia. Brains broad and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Muscle for hire, moving, assembly, errands, you name it, they will do it. Easy peasy is a multi-service team. If you need something, just ask. All right, Pete, we are back. As I said, we are at the halfway point of the season. I feel like now is a good time to kind of take a look at the playoff picture, the draft lottery picture. At this point, you kind of have an idea of what your team is. Are you competing? Are you rebuilding? Are you maybe somewhere in the middle, like the Suns that we've talked about in the past couple of weeks? Because we did talk about how we felt like the top 6 playoff picture was locked up. I don't know if that is necessarily true. That's something we can talk about in a few minutes. But first, just want to check in with you. You, of course, were away on vacation last week. You missed our power rankings episode. We had Angelo from the Most Athletic Suns. We had Bowen from the Zits on to give their takes, and we kind of shook up the power rankings a little bit. I don't know if you have any reactions to that show. Like I said, we did make some major changes in those in those power rankings. So I don't know if you have any comments on that. But how are you feeling coming back? Feeling refreshed, and what are your thoughts on what you missed out on?
It feels good. Feels good. I mean, shout out to Friends Who Gamble Media, the bosses above. Giving vacation time when it's due. It felt good. A little midway point through the season to jet off to San Diego for a week, so it felt good. And shout out to Angelo and Bowen. I mean, back-to-back weeks in the show for Angelo, one on for Bowen. But I know me and you, KB, we make it look easy being on the mic, but it's not. So shout out to them for getting on. Also, the Bowen, like, he's got to get some kind of webcam or a video camera or something. The man was holding up his phone for an hour. I was like, dude, your shoulder must be hanging. Like,
and we actually did our picks call. I believe we did our picks call after that. I think we took like a 15-minute smoke break. Got right back onto the Circa Million Armani Suits and Run call with my brother shortly after that. And, of course, he has the exact same setup. So
yeah,
we're talking about,
2 hours.
90 to 120 minutes of just holding his phone up.
And he doesn't even have it like posted up against a book or something. He's just straight up holding it. I was like, dude, your shoulder must be hanging. But yeah, awesome show. Big shake up in the tier rankings. I think I'll save my comments for next week on the tier rankings when we go through like what changed. But putting the Suns above myself, putting Zitz and Wallace above LLC and Vibers, or Simcoe and Vibers, I think, maybe LLC. But big shake up across the board. I'll save my comments for next week's show. I do have a special shout out to Lex Lumpkin. Congratulations. This is your 50th episode of the Lex Lumpkin Show. Personally, I'm at 45. There was a brief 5-episode hiatus last summer where I was put on hiatus for performance. So I'm still at 45, but I wanted to shout out Lex Lumpkin, 50th show in the books. It feels good.
Oh, thank you, Pete. I do appreciate that. I wish I knew. I would have gotten myself. I was just out getting some groceries. I would have stopped by, gotten a cookie cake or something.
Yeah, I've had this one on my calendar.
I do have a bowl packed after the show. Maybe I'll take a little bit more time to savor that and really think about how far I've come. I do think it is appropriate that I have just a couple more episodes on you. I think it would only be right for me to have the slight edge in episodes there. So I guess, you know what? That gives people something to look forward to. This is the 50th episode celebration of my time on the show. It does mean a lot. I think it's a good call to maybe save your power rankings takes for next week, since we're only a week away from doing that. I will say we did miss your opinion on one massive trade. We talked about 2 trades last week. We don't really have to go back over Angel's trade. To be honest, I already kind of forget what it was. But we can just talk about, check in with you on your thoughts on the Tua for Anthony Richardson trade. I know that Tua was a player that has been probably the most talked about player on this show, probably
By
definitely the
far.
most polarizing player on the show for sure. Um, I thought I'd never see the day when I do it. Of course, I gave my opinion on that trade, how I felt about it. But what were your reactions to it?
Yeah, I was actually at first I was a little upset because if you'll remember 3 weeks ago, I texted you and told you I had an Anthony Richardson take. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah, of
three
course.
weeks, and I never got it off. Just the way the flow worked out, the flow of the show just never really worked out. But that take was, would it be crazy for Bowen to trade Anthony Richardson, given how amazing his performance was in the first 4 weeks? It's his year. He's trying to compete. The take was, would it be crazy for Bowen to consider Anthony Richardson? And I thought it was a little out there. I honestly didn't think, I thought I'd get shot down. I didn't think people would like it. I think you'd be like, maybe I could see it, but probably not. I never got the take off. 2 weeks later, boom, the trade happened. So I was kind of congratulating myself for seeing something like that happen, but I never thought it would actually happen. I just kind of wanted to pitch it as a point for the show. But that being said, the trade makes sense. Like, your guys' breakdown is pretty straightforward. Bowen's a competitor. Tua's a I think he's top 5 quarterback right now in the league. He needs that quarterback to make a run for the chip this year. And as well as Anthony Richardson played, he's not going to play again until next year. So I think the trade makes sense across the board.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was one of those where, I think maybe people were expecting like a very explosive breakdown of the trade or anything, but
There's really not.
it really is. It's kind of just the definition of a win-win. Of course, we'll see how it plays out, but as far as immediate reactions, it's just like you just said. I mean, it was a trade for Bowen now, it's a trade for me later. It's 2 players that are fairly equal value. We kind of, when I was negotiating, I did factor in the fact that I was really helping him try and make that playoff push. So I got him to
Right.
throw in a little bit extra. Thought it was fair, but
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I thought I'd never see the day when I trade Tua. I don't know how direct I was about saying it on the show, but I know I've said it in different text conversations where it's one of those where he really wasn't on the block. That's not a trade that I would have made for just like any top quarterback. It was just one of those unique opportunities that came across my desk. It's one of those where, sometimes people put players on the block and they don't really know what they want for them. They want somebody
Mike
to
Bowen.
come and kind of
Mike
knock their
Bowen.
socks off with an offer. And that was one of
Mike
those
Bowen.
offers. So what's that? Mikey
Mike
Bowen?
Bowen. Yeah.
Exactly. So some people, they put it on there and they just want the attention. I feel like Mikey Bowen might have put Joe Burrow on the block because he felt like the attention was off him. Everybody was talking about this massive trade that went down, everything like that. And then he just throws that in there to shift the storyline back to him. And of course, I mean, I know that he had some offers out there, or at least one offer, I should say. And
if you want to
he
dive
quickly
into it,
shot it down.
I'll pull the curtain if you want to dive into it.
If you want to, I mean, it's your business, so I don't want to air out your dirty laundry. It's your
I don't want to air out mine or Mikey's, but I will, because I'm a little upset. Like, he put Burrow on the block after I already came to him with an offer. Mikey's obviously a team that's not going to make the playoffs this year, entering sort of a rebuild. I'm in QB hell. I think if when we get to my team, we'll talk about it. But this is still the vision for me. I never was supposed to compete this year. I always was rebuilding, but I do expect to compete next year and be in the playoffs. And with the quarterback play I've got right now, I'm just not going to do it. So, I already see myself getting re-tiered next year into a QB hell tier. So I made a move for Burrow. I won't say what the offer was, but I made the offer for Burrow. Mikey seemed open to moving him. He then put Burrow on the block after my offer to see if he could get something better. And then it just kind of fizzled out at that point. I checked in 2 or 3 times. I will air out his dirty laundry because I do have the quote right here now that I think about it. Quote unquote, when I checked in with Michael for the 3rd time on my offer, TBH, I have a lot of stuff going on right now with school projects and football and work. I'm too busy. That kind of hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I mean, just even hearing that as commissioner, I think, what the hell kind of excuse is that? It's like, you don't have 10 minutes in your day to just kind of think fantasy, talk things over. I mean, it's one of those where you don't have to have the whole conversation right now. You can send a text, you can be open and say, hey, I'm really busy, so I'm not going to be able to just hammer this out, but let's go back and forth. If you put somebody on the block, there needs to be just a ballpark of a price. The thing that I always say is you don't have to accept it. You can say, hey, I want this, and this, and then somebody offers it to you, and then you kind of actually see the offer in front of you, and you realize that, you know what, maybe that's actually not the return that you want or need. And you can just say no. And that is what it is. But to just act like you don't really have any idea. A lot of people, I think, play chicken when it comes to trade talks, and they they don't want to be the one to make the offer because they're afraid of making an offer, have somebody be like, instantly just be like, yes, let's do it. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Right.
And they feel almost obligated to follow through. If you make that offer, you can be like, you know what? Second thought, I feel this way about it. Could you throw in this, this, and this? And, you know, sometimes it can come across as like annoying or anything, but you're looking out for your team. If you don't want to make a trade or anything, you don't have to do it. So if you put somebody on the block, you need to have a rough ballpark to at least get conversation started. And I guess I know he did throw out, I want 4 first-worthy players, anything like that, or picks or anything like that. So if you throw it out there, you got to try and at least play ball a little bit. So to say that you don't have any time, you can't talk about it at all, that I just don't buy that excuse. To me, that is like when you're talking to a girl and you set something up and then you realize, you know what, you're kind of nervous or you're not really ready to do this. And then you just kind of, oh, you know what, like I'm doing this, I'm not going to be able to make it. And it's some bullshit excuse that you know is bullshit. She knows is bullshit. And you guys just move on with each other.
Yeah, the offer's still open. I still hope it comes together. I think it could be mutually beneficial, a win-win type deal. He has yet to reject anything. It's just open. So, you know, I'm not coming at Mikey. I'm just saying, hey, if you're watching this, shoot me a text back.
Yeah. All right. I mean, talking about your team, I guess we can make the quick segue into our matchup. I know we talk about how this is Lex and Pete. Some people want to see it be Lex versus Pete. Well, last week we did get that. We faced off with each other in the, in the league. It was our week 7 matchup. I don't remember what the projections were, but I'm assuming you must have been like a 10 to 20 point favorite just based off of what my projections typically are. I ended up coming away with the win. As you can see on my whiteboard behind me, I scored 119.06 points. Slippery Pete scored 82.1. Some quick notes. That was enough to get me to jump both Amaral and McMorrow in total points for. Of course, with where we're at in that race, it doesn't really mean much because we're so far out of the playoff race. That what's most important is the max points for. So I'm above McMorrow now. McMorrow might have passed me going into the last week. I don't remember, but this definitely opened that up a little bit more. I'm still 50 max points for above Amaral and 120 points above Mikey. So it didn't really make like a huge dent. It did make up some ground, and depending on how the next few weeks play out, that can definitely switch up that thing. But I can pull up the draft lottery right now, but before that, you got any comments on that matchup, Pete? How'd it feel to lose to me?
It didn't feel good. I'm here to win, and I lost. You put up 119. Your previous high for a week before that was 84, and you hadn't broken 80 in any other week this year. So you only broke 80 once this year at 84, and you put up a 120 spot on me. Stroker showed up. Stroker showed up when the lights were bright and put me to bed. There's nothing I can really say about it. I wish there was some sort of a matchup. We could have, it would have been nice if it was down the wire and then Addison puts up that number. I forget, it was the 4 o'clock slate or the night game.
That was the Monday night game.
Monday night game, yeah. So it would have been kind of cool if Addison put up that number and closed it out on Monday. But you had it wrapped up by halftime of the 1 o'clock. So loss is a loss. We move on.
Yeah, I mean, it felt good for me. It was good for morale. It's good to just try and stack some wins, even if the points for, max points for aren't necessarily there. You definitely had some bad luck. Deshaun Watson got hurt pretty early on. Realistically, it didn't even look like he was ready to be playing in that game to begin with. So I don't know how high his ceiling really was last Sunday. I think the bigger surprise was Bijan basically getting 0 run. I know that they're investigating it and they're looking into it because he wasn't on the injury report at all. Sounds like just leading up to the game, he got a migraine, a tummy ache, something like that, and he just wasn't able to go. And I mean, you can't blame him. He goes out there, kind of serves as a decoy. I think, he got 1 carry for 3 yards, but that was it. I mean, Cordarrelle was getting most of the work. Algier was getting most of the work, and Bijan was spending most of the time on the sidelines. Tough for fantasy owners. My thoughts and prayers to prop bettors as well. That's one of those where you feel like, shit, like, well, maybe it'll get waived if he doesn't step on the field, and then you see him and he's there and now you're screwed. You're paying out all those losses. So you did make it interesting. Pittman, Puka, Jonathan Taylor, put together a really nice week. It's good to see him do that. So, your team had some good things. My team, I know we were talking about how it's moving up and doing everything like that. I mean, this is not going to be the norm for my team. I mean, Deontay Foreman's not going to score 3 touchdowns every week. Jordan Addison had 2 touchdowns. I'm actually looking. I actually didn't have that crazy of touchdown luck. I thought I had way more touchdown luck than that. I think they were the only guys I had. Jerome Ford had that 69-yarder, but I really didn't have insane touchdown luck. So I guess maybe my team can, maybe start putting up 90-point weeks and start maybe pushing for 100, especially if, Levis is getting the start at quarterback. If Kyler Murray is making a comeback, he's, no longer, he's doubtful this week to play, but he's, practicing without limitations now. So I do think my team will take the step up. It's not going to be enough to really make a huge dent, but it might be enough to shake up the draft lottery. So let me pull that up right now just so we can get a look at it. Tell me, can you see it right now?
Yep, I got it.
All right. So here is the current state of the draft lottery. So on the left are the teams that are in that slot, and then to the right of it are the teams that own that pick. I'll just read both. So starting at 1 is Carson Wentz, that is owned by McMorrow. Starting at number 2 is the Slow Stroke Kings, that is owned by Slippery Pete. From there on out, all teams own their own picks. Number 3 is Schvoyadel. 4 is Go Tigers. 5 is Slippery Pete with his own pick. And then 6 is the Most Athletic Suns. Anything stick out to you here? I mean, one thing that sticks out to me is just kind of looking, and this is more of just like an OCD, symmetrical, pattern searching mind type of thing. But I see the 6 is here, the 7's here, then you got the 8th, and you got the pretty big gap with the Most Athletic Suns. So I do think the Suns are kind of stuck here. I think they're going to continue to try and compete this year. And I think because of that, they are not going to be able to really move up. They're not going to have their eyes on tanking at all. So they're not going to move down at all. So I think that they're there. I think the interesting spot is also you, Pete. It depends on what direction your team's going to go in, because you and Mikey are pretty close. I don't know where either of your motivations really lie. I'm maybe a little more in the dark on Mikey's motivations. And then after that, I think it's just going to be this race. Is Amaral going to tank? Is he going to continue to put up surprisingly way more points than we expected? How is my team going to perform for the rest of the year, especially with Kyler coming back and me starting to get some quarterback play? And then does McMorrow already have the 1-1 locked up? So where do you want to start? What are your reactions to the current state of the draft lottery?
I guess I do agree. The Suns are kind of locked in at that 6. I think we're going to talk about them a little bit more when we get to the playoff picture, because they are on the fringe, but they're kind of locked in the 6. I would say I don't have hopes of getting to 1-4 with my own pick. I know it's a tight race, but with Mikey having Justin Fields out, Justin Jefferson out, and I think I just have a much better roster than him, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, flex position, that I don't really that's not really on my radar to pass Mikey to 1-4. I'd love it, but I just don't really see it happening. I think the real question mark is between 2 and 3. So I think McMorrow, this was the week that McMorrow passed you to get the number 1 overall pick. And I don't see that changing. I think he's got it locked up. I'm going to say 4, 5, and 6 are locked up too, because I think that's how it's going to fall. The only thing I'm nervous for is Amaral, is me going back to the 1-3 from the 1-2 if Amaral passes you and max points for, or if you pass Amaral.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to watch. I mean, I'm trying to do the quick mental math in my head right now. So it's about 50 points. It's about a 50-point differential.
Yeah.
And of course, as we were talking about, that's not going to be I'm not going to be putting up 120 points every week. I don't even know if I'm going to exceed 100 points. How many more times are going to do that this season? Amaral, he's had 2 quarterbacks playing every week. Howell has been capable of putting up big weeks. Ritter, for as much shit as he gets as a throwing quarterback, he can put up some massive weeks as well. And then Baker has been pretty steady. He's been putting up points as well. So he's been getting that quarterback play. And then he's been getting some surprising play, not only in his starting lineup, but also he's been getting good players on his bench. I haven't really been getting bench production. And that's why we're seeing that differential between the points for, where I have more than Amaral, and then max points for, where I'm 50 whole points behind him. So that's the difference there. But yeah, I mean, I do think that McMorrow pretty much has that locked up. I think that it's just a matter of looking at, how things are going to project out for the rest of the year. I'm still going to have some shitty weeks for sure. I mean, I did get a lot of bye weeks out of the way. All my running backs, I think, have had their bye already. Wide receivers are starting to work through that. Traylon Burks has had his bye. Elijah Moore, Christian Watson, they've all had their bye. So I'm going to have a pretty full starting lineup for the rest of the year, I think. So I am going to put up more points. So I don't think that there's going to be any catching McMorrow unless, God forbid, and, knock on wood, but, there's some crazy injuries to my roster. So I think McMorrow has that locked up. I do think it'll be interesting seeing how this plays out, especially as I start getting more players coming back. But I do think with Mikey, he still has to kind of pick a direction, right? He's kind of stuck in that 4 spot. I think that he's just like, I don't think he has any real shot at making the playoffs. So it just depends on, does he want to try and trade guys away and strip his roster down? But then there's kind of just that point, right? It's almost like a supply and demand chart or anything like that, or you know, any type of chart like that, where it's like, how far do you want to go before it becomes not worth it or not profitable or anything like that? Because if he's going to trade away Burrow, what type of returns is he getting on that? If he's trading away T. Higgins, what type of returns is he getting on that? And that could tank his roster, but is it going to do enough to move him up in the draft order, or is it worth him just holding on to those players?
Yeah, that was kind of a take you got off last week too. It's like you were afraid Mikey was going to trade too deep into a rebuild rather than just kind of retooling in 1 year. One thing I'll also say is McMorrow still has not figured out how to tank. Now, no one has been a bigger McMorrow guy than me. I've preached it for the 2.5 years we've done the show. I've never met the man in person, but I absolutely love him head over heels. He still doesn't know how to tank. The guy picked up Tyson Bagent last week because he's starting quarterback, right? Tyson Bagent puts up 12.88 points. When you're tanking, you do not want to have anyone on your roster, especially a quarterback, that's going to put up a good portion of points and hurt your max points for if you don't see them in your vision long term. Right now, Tyson Bagent, D2 quarterback phenom, I guess, right? D2 quarterback phenom is something I heard. He's not a long-term guy. Like, he is not going to be starting games for McMorrow next year or any year after that. But he picks him up and starts him, which hurts his own max points for. Not only does it hurt his own max points for, but you were going to be the team that picked up Bagent if McMorrow didn't.
Outbid me by 1 fab, I believe.
1 fab.
That was it.
1 fab. Now that points, if it doesn't go to McMorrow, then it goes to you, which then increases the gap between his pick 1-1 and your pick, which I own 1.2.
I believe he outscored because that led to me picking up Hoyer. And I believe he outscored Hoyer by, at least 10 points. I think he had 10, 11,
Tyson Bagent had 12.88. Hoyer had 1.5. I did the math. Yeah. It works out to 24.6 points if Tyson Bagent was in your starting lineup instead of McMorrow's last week. I don't think that 24.6 points is going to matter. I think it'll be bigger gap than that between 1 and 2, but it would be hilarious if after 2 episodes of us specifically talking about tanking, McMorrow still didn't understand how to tank and doesn't get the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams, because of Tyson Bagent.
Yeah, it's something that we've talked about offline before as well, because I had reached out and I'll admit, I texted McMorrow. I said, you're a dummy. You should have let me pick him up.
Yeah.
It's not collusion or anything. It's just like, you should have let me get him. And that should have been part of your strategy, because when you think about it, and I made that clear on the show. I believe I've said it in the league chat as well.
Multiple
There
times.
is no obligation to pick up players or trade for people. You should not feel obligated to trade assets or use fab to fill out a roster for like a week or even for the season. Your roster is your roster, right? If you have active available players on your roster, you are obligated to start them. So if Bagent, whatever, if he was already on the team, then yes, you would have to start him because he is a starting quarterback. You need a starting quarterback that week. He has to be in your lineup. And if you don't, he's going to count against your max points for anyways. But he went out of his way to pick him up. And I think that it's just part of maybe the learning curve of teams that are rebuilding. I know I've had this mindset before as well, where you pick somebody up and you think, oh, if I do that, I can flip him. The reality is, especially at this point in the season, nobody's trading anything for that. And if it is, then you have to be prepared to trade the guy that you just spent 15 fab on for a 2026 third from like a good team. Because like that, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that hustle either. That is like getting something for practically free. Because at this point in the season, especially for a team like McMorrow, what the fuck does fab mean, right? So like, who cares? You don't need that fab. If you can turn that into anything, then that's a profit. So it's like if even if you spent 100 fab on Bagent and then you traded him for a 26th third, it's like, honestly, that's money well spent, because you're getting that third, you're adding it. That is something that you can throw into a trade, anything like that. That fab's not going to do anything good at this point. There really aren't many worthy players of picking up in the season anyway, so you're probably not going to spend it on anything. But he did that. He got a little greedy, right? After I texted him, he was trying to trade Bagent to me for the fab that I would have spent and then a player on top of that. And I said, it's really just too bad I missed out, because like, I'm not going to start trading players like Izzy Abanaconda, who I used a draft pick on, just to get this, week by week replacement quarterback. He's not going to be part of my team long-term. I have my quarterbacks. I have 2 already. Hopefully I have 3 after this week from Levis. it's not worth it for me. So I missed the boat. It hurt McMorrow's tank a little bit. Who knows how much that'll actually affect him in the long run. But yeah, just like a note to all, it's like that's part of the strategy as well. Like you said, if he is not part of your vision long term, there's no reason for him to be taking up space on your team and adding points against what you need to be doing.
Don't know how many times we're going to say it, but here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that kind of sums up the draft lottery. I think it kind of speaks for itself, right? I think in a couple of weeks we'll have a more clear picture as we get closer to the end of the season, and then we'll see kind of how these projections kind of pan out, right? Am I going to continue to put up more points? What's Amaral going to do? What direction is Mikey going to go in? But beyond that, I mean, I think that, it's a good check-in for the halfway point. I think that maybe we can get into some mock draft content soon. Yep. Now that we have, I think we're getting to that point of the year, so we could talk about that. We can start planning that out, but let's switch over to the playoff picture now. So here is the overall playoff picture. This is by points for, so I did include the non-playoff teams. I feel like it's at least interesting to see how different teams stack up. But of course, right now it looks like there is the 6 that we talk about. One thing that I picked up, I think I kind of erased a little bit of my writing here anyways. One thing that I found interesting is that the wild card teams right now are currently outscoring the divisional leaders. Right now, their total points are 2,580.04 from the wild card compared to 2,443.24 from the divisional leaders. So that is about 140 more points total that those 3 teams are scoring than the other 3. And I mean, just looking at it, it kind of pops out at you. You see the 879, you see 875. The only divisional winner that's coming close to that right now is 2 Pins, which is 838.96. And Simcoe, who is the 6th seed, is only 13 points behind that. So there is quite a discrepancy between the scoring and the records. And I think that kind of speaks to the format that we go with our playoff format, where it's all about getting as many wins as possible and winning your division to get that top 3 seed and hoping you get that top 2 and get that bye week. But like I said, to me, fantasy football is a game of scoring points, and the best teams score the most points. Fuck scheduling luck. If you can put up a ton of points, you're probably going to get into the playoffs either way. So I think it's interesting to see that. What's your reaction here, especially as a team that is kind of on the outside looking in? I mean, looking at it right now, just looking at record, we were talking about Big Brain maybe being a team to slip out. That is the closest playoff team that you are to, and you're still 140 points behind them. So how are you feeling in that 8th spot and kind of looking up at that playoff picture?
Yeah, I don't think I'm looking up. I think I'm looking down towards the draft order. I don't expect my team to really make a push to get there, especially with Deshaun out, Bryce not really being Bryce yet, still not year. I don't expect me to be in there. I think the Suns are the only team you can actually talk about of being, I'll just call it the first team out. The only team out, really, is the Suns. The only team out.
Or would they be the last team out, technically?
I think the first team out, right? And the last team. First and the last
team. Because I'd say, technically McMorrow's like the first team out because he's out.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of Joe Lunardi. I'm trying to think of what he says.
Yeah, but we're on the same page. But so I don't really have any hopes for the playoffs. But what sticks out to me when I look at this is the 2nd and 3rd team. And it hurts my heart because they're 2 friends of mine. But Gino and the Zits and Big Brain LLC are the clear outliers in this playoff 6. So I did a little deep dive on their points. In the first 4 weeks, I think in week 4, we did a tier ranking episode. We had Gino and the Zits as the team to beat, with LLC right behind them in the Omaha tier, I think right under 2 Pins. So they were like the 2nd and 3rd teams in the league. I looked at their average from weeks 1 to 4 versus weeks 5 to 7. The Zits in weeks 1 to 4 put up 122, 114, 110, and 160 for an average of 126 points in the first 4 weeks. Weeks 5 through 7, 108 points, 102 points, 88 points for an average of 99 points in the last 5, 6, 7, last 3 weeks. That's a 30-point drop between the first 4 weeks and the last 3 weeks for average. Now, you could say it's because of bye weeks, because of injuries. It might as well could be, but none of the other teams besides Big Brain dropped that far. Big Brain, weeks 1 through 4, 119, 131, 161, 104 for an average of 128 in weeks 1 through 4. Weeks 5 through 7, 96, 70, and 111 for an average of 92, a 36-point drop from weeks 1 to 4 to weeks 5 to 7. So it was really the last 3 weeks that took the Zits and the LLC out of the top elite tier of the playoff teams. Now, even though they are still division winners, and I think Bowen probably still has the division locked up because no one else is competing really record-wise. The Suns are only 2-5 right now. These two teams are the rats amongst the bunch, and it smells. You can see it in the points.
Yeah, I just did the math real quick. That's a 21.4% drop off
There you
for the
go.
Zits between the first month and then the last month. And then 28.13% for Big Brain LLC. I do agree with what you said
Massive
for the
drop.
Zits. What's that?
That's a massive drop.
Oh, that's huge. I mean, that is a very significant amount of points. I do agree with what you said about the Zits, right? They seem to, right, seven. So we're through 7 weeks, right? There's 7 weeks left. They have a 4-game lead in the division. It's pretty hard, right? It's like when you're getting to like the second half of a football game and you
Right.
start realizing, well, there's only like 3 or 4 possessions left. How can we really make up this deficit? It's going to be tough for any team to catch them wins wise. So they might have that third seed. And I feel like that's kind of been the Zitz's MO for the last couple of years.
I
Is
think they've won it every year.
yeah,
right?
not putting up a ton of points, but scoring enough or winning enough to get that top 3 seed and get that
Right.
third seed overall. So that's kind of been their thing. And it is going to be tough for them to lose that. But that is like an upset alert thing for the playoffs, right? Especially going against some of these high scoring ones. Big Brain is the team that we really want to watch here. I mean, they're
Right.
6-1, just like the Zits, but the problem is they're in, controversially, I call it, the best division in the league, right? It seems to be the most, competitive division year in, year out. But we haven't actually won anything. So
Right.
I guess you can't really call it that. But it's a division full of heavy hitters. We got Big Brain at 6-1. You got Wallace at 5-2. You got the Bussy Boys at 4-3. Wallace is outscoring them by 80 points. Simcoe is outscoring them by about 30 points. If they start dropping off and losing these games, and if they're scoring at the slower pace that they're at, they can easily give this up. I mean, if they lose next week and Wallace catches up to them, then all of a sudden they're in the wild card. They're at the bottom of the wild card, and they're only 50 points ahead of the Suns. And I know that
Right.
I know that we were talking after you would watch the power rankings episode, and I think initially you were maybe taken aback by the sudden claim that the Suns were in it and where they were ranked.
I was.
But then I think that you also came around on it because you started looking into the numbers like we were talking about on the show and saying, like, you know what, shit, like, because I think it is kind of the natural reaction by everybody in the league. Like when the Suns say that they're going to compete, it's like, yeah, all right.
All right.
Dude.
Yeah.
Like,
All right, buddy.
yeah, we hear you, man.
Yeah.
Sure. But then you look at it, and yeah, if Big Brain falls out of this, or I mean, even if Simcoe starts slowing down a bit, let's not put Simcoe in that safe position either, because he's only 80 points ahead of them right now, and we got 7 weeks left. If Simcoe slows down at all, and the Suns can keep their foot on the gas, that can get interesting as well. But I think that the Suns should really be rooting for Big Brain to lose this divisional lead, because then all of a sudden that could be a little bit of a landslide.
Right. And you look at the records too. Big Brain 6-1, Wallace 5-2. That's a 1-game switch. Big Brain 6-1, Bussy Boys 4-3. So like these matchups down the stretch when you play your division again at the end of the year is going to be massive in the Sprite Cranberry League, because you can see a path right now of Big Brain losing one, Wallace winning one. So they have a tied record of 6-2. Wallace jumps up to the division winner, and Big Brain 7-9-6 goes down to the worst wild card, only 50 points behind the Suns. So
yeah, I just have to say though, because I do think that this is important, at least for the discussion now.
Yep.
This week's matchup, Big Brain has Amaral,
okay.
and Wallace has the Zits.
Okay.
So it's a little bit tougher. So we might not see that Big Brain slide yet. I mean, because Wallace is projected to win, and like we were just talking about, the Zits, they're sliding. So it's like at least a more losable game
Right.
than well, I don't know, maybe not though. If Big Brain's scoring at the pace of, maybe not. I'm not going to say anything, because just because when you pull up the numbers, I guess we can't really call any of these a sure thing. But I mean, I think that Big Brain has a better chance of winning here than Wallace does against the Zits. And if anything, I mean, that just puts it off for at least a week, right? And then I'm looking ahead now. Then you got Big Brain versus Two Pins. There we go. That's tough. And then you got Wallace versus Mikey Bowen. It looks like they both have a ton of bye weeks that week. You got Wallace versus the Vibers, and then Big Brain versus Mikey. Big Brain just has some good scheduling luck. I don't know if we're actually going to see this. It's going to take Big Brain to consistently be scoring these 92-point weeks for them to really have a shot, but they kind of have a soft schedule the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's it's going to come down to the division games, the end of the year after that slate, I think. But that is the question on my mind going into the back half is, can Wallace take the division from Big Brain? And if so, can Big Brain and Bussy Boys hold off the Suns to get into the playoff picture?
Yeah, and I'm looking too. I want to see for the LeBron haters. I mean, the Vipers are only a win behind 2 pins as well. So, I mean, we have a really tight playoff race. And like we said, I mean, these wildcard teams, they are scoring clearly. You can see it on the screen.
Yeah.
They're scoring at a much more torrid pace than these division winners are. And like I was saying, if you score points in this league, you're going to find success, right? Last year, there was kind of like the talk about McMorrow, getting screwed out of the playoffs because he won like 10 games. But I think he was like 8th in points. It's like, that's pure scheduling luck. That is what I was trying to remove from fantasy football, right? If you won more, okay, in any other division, yeah, maybe he wins it as a divisional winner or anything like that. But then he probably would have gotten the quick boot out of the playoffs, and he probably would have gotten, like upset by a wild card team. So it's like we got 2 teams here, the 4 and the 5 seed in Wallace and the Virus, are both knocking at the door of the divisional winners. And then if any of those, so if Big Brain or if 2 pins were to fall out of it, that could shake things up because they're not guaranteed to be the 4 seed or the 5 seed if they're not the division winner either. I mean, like we said, Big Brain, they're in danger. I don't know if 2 pins is quite there because, I mean, for the Suns to catch them, they'd have to probably pass Big Brain. They probably have to pass the Bussy boys. So 2 pins is probably safe regardless. And I just trust their roster construction in general. But I mean, we have a very interesting playoff picture to keep an eye on down the stretch.
Yeah, one that we haven't had before. It's been pretty clear cut the last couple of years. This is interesting. It's going to be tight down the stretch for sure.
Yeah, and it's like a perfect mix of like the division race causing drama. If somebody drops out and they're in the wild card, and then the Suns just kind of doing that. And that's why I like the idea of having the max points for when it comes to the draft lottery and the tanking teams and everything like that, because there's literally no reason for you not to start your best lineup because it's not going to make a difference. It's going to count all the same. So you might as well have that count towards you. And then it's fun to play upset. I mean, not that you were necessarily, on the verge of claiming a playoff spot or anything, but beating a team like yours that has like kind of those like, should I or shouldn't I, make this push for the playoffs? Being able to be like, no, you get to stay back here with me. I'm pulling you back down into the mud. That's what I like. That's the type of fantasy I like to play. So I like teams going out there and playing spoiler, and that's why I've been excited to get Kyler back too. Because if I could fuck up any of these teams' weeks down the stretch, that would make me so happy. But yeah, I'm excited for those division matchups at the end of the year too.
I like it. Can I get a Deshaun Watson takeoff?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Much like you felt like you had to defend Tua last year, I feel like I need to defend Deshaun. A lot of Deshaun slander this week with him going in for 2 series and then coming out with a bum shoulder again. Turns out that shoulder was micro tears in his rotator cuff, which is a 4-week recovery time. So he was trying to go play 4 weeks before he could even, like the general NFL timeline for that injury. He was trying to play 4 weeks before ahead of time. So like, I'm not worried about his performance last game at all. But it made me dig into the numbers because there was a lot of Deshaun slander. So Deshaun, since he's come back from his 2-year hiatus, he's played 9 full games. 9 full games since he came back. 6 last year and 3 this year. In those 9 games, he's averaging 15 points per game. Nothing crazy, but also, a top around 12 quarterback, 15 points per game. Those 9 games also include a quarterback 8 performance, a quarterback 6 performance, a quarterback 5 performance, and a quarterback 10 performance. So that's 4 out of 9 top 10 QB performances with a 15 points per game average since he's been back. I just wanted to get that off and say, hey, you're ripping Deshaun, however you feel about him morally, whatever. However, he's looked for an NFL quarterback, whatever. He's been a solid fantasy quarterback since he's returned. And I don't think anyone else sees that or is agree with it unless they hear those numbers. 4 top QB performances out of 9 games since he's gotten back. And he's got a 4-week recovery now with micro tears in his rotator cuff. I think 3 weeks ago I said it. It was when do we say Deshaun Watson no longer has this? You're coming back from an injury, you're coming back from the hot time off, like your grace period is ended. You have to be that guy now. I think we're approaching that, but we're not there yet. 9 games in, I'm still giving him 3 or 4 more weeks, like fully healthy, to show me he can be my cornerstone quarterback. And from what I've seen in the 9 games since he's coming back, I still believe he can. I just needed to get that off.
Yeah, no, this is like the year of no excuses for him, right? This is the make or break year where it's like, are you the guy still, or have you completely lost it? And we're only in week 8 of that, right? We're going into week 8, and he's going to miss a couple of games. So, like I said, he hasn't even played a full 16 to really get that judgment. I think that, assuming he has to spend some time out and get this recovery in by the end of the year, between the 2 years he's been back, that should give him that full 16. That's where you can make the evaluation. He doesn't have to be the Deshaun Watson of old by the end of the year, but you want to see those signs that he is. You want to see him step up, maybe get some of that accuracy back. I think that that's something that's really been suffering for him since his return. You want to see, and not just like the actual accuracy, completions for completion percentage, all that stuff, but even just little things, right? And that was a game that, something I picked up on a couple weeks ago, because I've tried to watch the Browns pretty closely. I got Jerome Ford, I got Elijah Moore, so I want to know how my guys are going. Shout out NFL Sunday Ticket. Greatest investment I've ever made. But I was watching, and like, he was struggling. There was a game where I tweeted, if the sideline was 6 inches wider, if it was a little bit further out, Elijah Moore would have had like 7 catches for 100 yards or something. It was like they were just missing on those sideline connections. And that's what I've noticed a lot. It's not just those passes, but it's a lot of the stuff that involves, like the supreme accuracy and the perfect touch. He doesn't quite have it back yet. So we need to see by the end of the year him start to get that back, him start to look like his old self. He doesn't have to be that quite yet, but you need to see some of those signs just to feel encouraged coming out of this year. But I mean, I totally agree. And one thing that I've been really trying to work on, this year is not to be too reactionary. So if my guys go out, and I'm happy that I didn't, right? Because my team got off to a slow start. My rookies weren't all performing, right? Kincaid was, on the field a bunch, but he wasn't getting like the big stats while Laporta was, going off and all that shit. I held on, and now we're seeing Kincaid start to break out, right? Jordan Addison, he was putting up the good weeks, but he was more touchdown heavy. Now all of a sudden he's getting his opportunity. It's things like that where, a weaker mind might have just pulled the trigger and been like, fuck it, I don't want to wait. Let me try and find a suitor for this guy or whatever, get rid of him and try and get, what I view as safer value. But holding on to that, and the take that I had going in this year was that I thought that Deshaun was going to come back. I thought that they were going to start building a stronger passing offense around him. And give him the reins more. And they're starting to do that. Like, he is throwing more. He's throwing like 35, 40 times a game sometimes. So I think that we just need to see him get back into that role, get comfortable with it. But I'm not ready to give up on him yet.
Yeah, it's week 8. He's only played 3 games this year. I'm giving him to the end of the year to show me he can be that guy for my team anyway.
Yeah. All right, we got anything else? I mean, I feel like we kind of covered the draft lottery. We covered the playoff picture. I think that we have some interesting storylines to keep an eye out for. And I think that, I think a month from now we should have a really good idea, right? Because we got 7 regular season games left going down that stretch. I think that'll be leading into, I almost want to like put a bookmark on that episode, because that should be leading into those final 3 divisional matchups. And I think that that'll be like maybe one of the most interesting pieces of the schedule in this league's history, just with how things are starting to shake up. So I'm excited to look forward to that. I feel like we've covered all that. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add, Pete.
No, good luck to Will Levis and Malik Willis this weekend.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready to see him. I'm curious to see how they deploy. They've kind of talked about using them in like a 2 quarterback thing. I've seen different theories. Of course, nobody actually knows. Maybe they start using Malik as like a Taysom Hill type, where he goes in wildcat quarterback, can step back and throw if he has to, can take off and run, and use his big body for that type of stuff. People are discrediting Levis's rushing ability. I mean, his last year in college, he definitely took a step back overall with his stats. That's because he had a lot of guys on that team leave for the pros. So he did not have guys that were really NFL caliber players. It's kind of similar to,
Sam Howell.
Yeah, exactly. It's the exact same type of situation where he had the weapons, he had players that were like, able to elevate himself as well as him elevating them. And then you lose that. And of course, you're going to take a step back, especially at the college level. So I think people kind of are sleeping on him just based off of how he was his last season. And then, of course, with the draft slide that everybody was talking about. But he has shown it. And the thing I like about him is that he's like a pure QB coach guy. I follow him on Instagram every week. He's posting highlights. He's on with his quarterback coach on Zoom. He's just getting reps in. This guy is like a pure, like, rich boy quarterback camp his whole life. He's probably got the technique down perfect. So I'm excited to see him step in. I'm excited to see how he can play in this offense. And if he's able to give the Titans any type of spark, as they approach the trade deadline. But that's definitely my matchup to watch this week. I'm going to be heavily invested in that. I mean, we got Levis playing. I got Drake London playing. You got your boy Malik. You got Kyle Pitts. You got Bijan. So I think that's the Lex and Pete matchup of the week.
You did. You did make a promise about if Will Levis did get the start.
That is true. Tomorrow morning, I will be going out. I think I'll give it like maybe like until like 10 o'clock just to maybe get
All
like
right.
an official announcement. I think I'm going to do it regardless. He's going to play.
Yeah.
He's the expected starter. So I don't think I need like the official announcement. But yeah, maybe around like 10, 11 o'clock, I'll go out, get a nice cup of coffee. I got the mayo in the fridge, and I'm going to do a mayo coffee. I'm going to do one. I've never shied away from a food challenge at all. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And if that can will my boy Levis to a big week, then I'm all for it.
I love it. I love it.
All right, that's the Lex and Pete show. That is week 8. We'll be back next week to do more of the power rankings tiers. When is the NFL trade deadline?
Good question.
Is that next week? Because I think that ours is like 2 weeks after that.
Ours is week 10 for sure.
So it might be next week. Let's get a quick check on that because that'll be
October 31st.
October 3rd.
Next week.
That's 3 days from now. That's Tuesday. That's okay.
Sunday,
So
yeah.
this upcoming episode, we'll have power ranking tiers 4.0, 3.0, 4.0, I think.
4.0.
4.0. We'll have power ranking tiers 4.0, NFL trade deadline reactions, and anything else that we want to talk about in the league. We will see you next week.